Let me ask you a question. When was the last time that you were in an actual conversation? Like in an actual conversation. Not thinking about what you were going to reply, or not thinking about the next message you have on Facebook, or even not thinking about the next item on your grocery list. If you needed a bit more time to remember, you are not alone. As humans, we actually talk a lot. And Newswire survey conducted back in 2010 revealed that we actually do 27 conversations a day. That is 4.5 hours in a day, 68 days in a year of us talking. Now, what piqued my interest is respondents say that 43% of these conversations they actually believe to be pointless. Almost half of our conversations we believe are pointless. And I think I know why. I think we have forgotten to be much more intentional. With the development of technology, with the development of social media, and the proliferation of AI, we've learned to keep pace to the speed of these technological developments. We learn to respond to the next email. We learn to answer the next question. And we learn to give opinion to the next input. But somewhere in between, we stopped communicating. We exchanged words with each other, yes, but we stopped communicating. Now, the missing skill in our modern conversation is not in our ability to use our language. It's not even in our ability to be more confident in facing one another, but rather it's in our ability to be much more intentional. Now, my name is Ellie and I work in communications and I study communications at a graduate level for a couple of years now. And I spent years studying how people connect and how these connections actually fall apart when we stopped being intentional. I ended up in this field since communications is a convergence of all my interests in life. I'm interested in music, I'm interested in graphic design, I'm interested in film, advertising production, and storytelling. And a common thread in those interests is how we share meaning with each other. And that in itself is communication. Now, I want to talk about how we bring intention back into our conversations. We look at 4 easy shifts that would make a huge difference. Pausing before we react, listening to understand, then listening to reply, choosing our words carefully, and speaking with purpose. Now let's start with the hardest one. Remember the time when someone says something to you and you immediately wanted to fire or attack back. Now, you deliver your reply and then 3 to 5 minutes later, you immediately regret what you've said. Maybe it's your instinct or maybe it's your defense mechanism trying to kick in. But that response or reply that you did is not responding. It's much more reacting. And in those instances, here's what happens to our brain. When someone triggers an emotional response to us, our amygdala, or the part of our brain that processes emotions and fears, immediately kicks in. And psychologist Daniel Goleman actually calls this amygdala hijack. Before your rational brain can even process the information that it has received, your emotional brain has already taken over and replied. And replied something that you will regret later on. But here's the good news. The good news is a simple pause can interrupt that hijack. Mindfulness Journal research reveals that people who pause have lower levels of cortisol. That means people who pause are much less stressed than people who do not pause. New York Times reporter David Gels has taken this concept a bit further and created the STOP method, or the STOP method. S for stop, T for the breath, O for observe, and P to proceed on what you're about to say. Now, this pausing and this stop method takes about 3 seconds. But that 3 seconds can significantly change the direction of your conversation. To be honest, in my personal experience, I do not catch myself all the time. But when I do, pausing actually helps me, actually gives me time to think and proceed in managing the conversations toward a direction that is more favorable or more positive. Next, this is the one that we think that we're all good at, but we're actually not. Stephen Covey, a renowned author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said something that stuck to me. He said, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." Most people listen with the intent to reply. Now think about the conversation you've had that while the person is talking, you were already thinking of your response in your head. Yes, you nod. Yes, you seem very engaged to this other person, but you're actually waiting for your turn. In that instance, you're not actually listening. You're cueing. Real listening means setting aside our own agenda and then actually focusing to what the other person is actually saying. That is what Stephen Covey calls empathic listening. Empathic listening is not listening so you can respond. Empathic listening is more of plainly listening to understand. Now, here's my question for you. In your last conversation, or in the last conversation that you've had, were you listening to understand, or were you just waiting for your time to talk? Now, we have paused. We have listened. But then, what then do we actually say? Now, I think words are powerful, and they are not powerful in a sense like a Facebook motivational quote that we often see, right, on Facebook every day. We think that it is powerful neurologically. Research from Target Training International Center for Applied Cognitive Research, quite a mouthful, found that certain words trigger stress responses in our brain. When people hear words that go against with their values, with their beliefs, or with their conversation styles, it can actually shut down the conversation, before the conversation have started. On the other hand, choosing the right words can actually build trust, it can build connection with the other person, and it can make the other person feel that they're heard. If we think about it, there is a huge difference in saying, "You're overreacting," than in saying, "I can see that this is deeply affecting you." It has the same intent, but a completely different impact. Now, I encourage you to, in your next conversation rather, try to swap "you" statements that feel a bit defensive and opt for "I" statements instead. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," instead say, "I feel like I am not being heard." And finally, to tie it all together, it's important that when we speak with purpose. This does not mean that we need to be deep or profound in our way of conversing. This means that we should just ask ourselves, why am I saying this? Why am I saying the sentences or the words that I'm about to say? Am I adding value to this conversation that I'm having with the other person? Am I trying to connect with this other person that I'm talking to? Remember in my earlier point, 43% of our conversations, or almost half of our conversations, we believe are pointless. Almost half of our conversations, we believe, are pointless. This is not because our conversations in itself are boring, but it's because we do not speak with purpose in mind. People speak, oftentimes, for the sake of speaking. People speak for the sake of speaking. Now, intentional speakers are not in a conversation to talk. Intentional speakers contribute. Intentional speakers match their words with what's appropriate with the moment. Now, to bring everything together, intentional communication is built on 4 easy habits. Pausing before reacting, giving time for your rational brain to catch up to your emotional brain when responding. Listening to understand, not listening to reply. And while listening, setting aside your own mental agenda and focus on the person. Choose your words quite carefully, knowing that words can either shut down or connect with the other person. Speak with purpose. Say thoughts that actually matter for you or the person you are talking to. Now, this week, I ask you to try one thing. Go into one conversation with much more intentionality. Pause before you speak. Listen and actually listen when they talk. Choose your words carefully when you respond, and ask yourself, what is the purpose of this conversation that I'm having with this other person? Try it for just one conversation, and then let's see what changes. Now, we work in a fast environment. We live in a fast environment, and somewhere in that speed, we stopped being present for each other. Now, the missing skill in our modern conversation is not something that we still need to go out and enroll on in a university and learn. It's something that we already have within ourselves. We just need to slow down and slow down long enough to use it. Pause, listen, choose your words, and speak with purpose. That's intentional communication, and it begins the moment we decide to be present. Thank you.